What's up, podcast land? It's your girl Niche, and welcome back to another episode of Laughing and Crying. This is the podcast that values our relationships, including the one we have with ourselves. If you're new, welcome. I guarantee you're going to have some fun today. On today's show, we're going to start out with Let Me Tell You a Story, and then we're going to have a conversation about codependency. I know you guys are like, Nisha, these heavy topics. It's okay. We're learning. We're growing, guys. I'm sorry. So let's get into it. I do have somebody in the building, and I'm really excited about it. Her name is Jen. Jen, say what's up to the people.
What's up? Hey, guys.
And I've got to know Jen and her story and her smile and all the things. But I know that you guys are like, who's Jen? Jen, can you tell the people a little bit about who you are?
Yeah, so my name's Jen, and I'm an interior designer, actually. I own my own business. I'm here chatting with Niche because, I've been through quite the ringer living in a narcissistic family cult. I came out of it about 7 years ago. So I've just learned a lot about codependency. My counselor recommended a book, Codependent No More, within the first week of counseling. And I
need to write that down.
I was like, what the heck is codependent? I don't even know what that word means.
And speaking of, guys, that's what we're talking about. Like I said, codependency. And it's so funny because I feel like people use the word a lot, but don't really know what it means at the same time. But we're just like always throwing it around. So I'm just really excited to hear your story because I go to therapy. I promote therapy. Y'all go to therapy. Okay. You've been in therapy, so you've been able to process a lot of your story and your past. And so I'm really excited to hear about it. But speaking of stories, we just start out with Let Me Tell You a Story. And I'm usually the one that tells it. But today I'm not telling it. Jen's going to tell it. Take it away, Jen.
Let me tell you a story. So about 14 years ago, I met a man on online dating. Yes. And he led me to a family that seemed just really great, really welcoming, really warm and inviting. And they had this communal lifestyle, and they just really seemed to connect and vibe and help each other out. But I would soon realize that I was in a situation that was not a healthy situation. So my story today is a specific story about laundry day. Let's talk about laundry day. So I lived in a home with 5 families and about 7 children. Oof. And we had laundry day because there were so many of us that we were always fighting for the washer and dryer, right? So we had our specific days, and I had my specific day to do laundry, and I went downstairs and I was doing my laundry, and you just live in the laundry room for your day because you got to get it all done within that one day. And our cult leader, our narcissist of the family, the matriarch that ran the show, was chit-chatting on the phone, just enjoying her evening with a friend, and it was dinner time. And so everybody got called to dinner, and we had dinner. Well, she was on the phone talking to someone, and you don't interrupt when she's in her zone and doing her thing, because that would be rude, and we would get yelled at. So we all ate and went on our merry way, and I went back to the laundry room to do my laundry, right? And she gets off the phone and realizes that we all ate dinner without her. And how dare us all eat dinner without her? And she just lost it, yelling, screaming, F-bombs, just the whole shebang of what an injustice it was that we ate dinner without her. And I can just remember being in the laundry room, like, I'm just going to hunker down in here. I'm going to do my laundry, and I'm just going to stay in here until she cools off, because I do not want to deal with this attack, right?
Right.
But that wasn't good enough for her. So one by one, she called everybody into the kitchen, couple by couple, family by family, to yell at them, scream at them, berate them, and tell them how horrible it was that we didn't call her to dinner. So it was my turn to get called into the kitchen. I walk into the kitchen and I'm like bracing myself for this, it's like, I know it's coming. I already heard 4 other couples get yelled at, and now it's our turn to get yelled at. And she just starts yelling, and it's just everything within you wants to stand up for yourself, right? Like you want to say, this isn't okay. It's not okay for you to talk to me this way.
Right.
And it's not okay for you to be so angry when, we're actually trying to keep your best interest in mind. Like you were in a conversation, and you want to defend yourself. You want to stand up for yourself. And I can just remember getting ready to, right? Like taking the breath for the words to come out. And one of the sons was standing right behind her, and he just motioned with his hand back and forth across his neck, giving me the nonverbal cue of keep your mouth
like don't
shut.
you dare. Yeah.
Do not say a word or you're gonna get it, right? And so I just closed my mouth and I took it and then went back to doing the laundry. And that is just one example, one story of lots and lots of days of living in a home where you weren't allowed to speak your voice. You weren't allowed to have needs, wants, or desires. You weren't allowed to have an opinion. You were to keep your mouth shut and just do what you were told and carry on with your day.
Yeah.
So it was an experience. I'll tell you that much.
And I'm like, you guys, I know she's like not even scratching the tip of the iceberg of everything that she's been through in this situation. And that's what kind of brought up this topic of codependency, because did you label the situation that, along with being a cult, that you felt that it was a codependent situation?
Oh, yeah. Well, so, I grew up being a very strong, opinionated person, right? My dad always taught me, like, you stand up for yourself. Like, don't let people walk all over you. I'm also a redhead, for those of you who are listening and can't see me. And, we got a little fire under us.
A little fiery.
Right? And so, to end up in a situation where one person controls your life, it's like, how did I get there? Right? You ask yourself, like, how did this even happen, that I would get in a situation where somebody else is controlling me and somebody else is, and I'm not standing up for myself. Like everything within my core that I know is not, I can't do it. And why is that? And how did I end up here? And it wasn't until I went to I got out of the cult. I got into counseling, and it was through counseling that I realized, right, that I had this codependent nature. And what does that mean? Like, how does that break down to me in my life? Is there was so much in me that wanted to please, that wanted to make sure that everybody else is taken care of. Make sure that I'm putting everyone else's needs above my own. And so then when you operate in that way, right, you're moving and you're orchestrating, you don't have any boundaries, right? Because your boundaries are what other people, whatever anybody else needs, right? And so then when you meet someone that's a narcissist, right, they can spot that a mile away, and they can see, oh, I can ask Jen to do anything and everything, and she's going to bend over backwards to want to make sure that I'm happy, that I'm taken care of, that I'm pleased. And so they take that and they just run with it, right? Abuse it.
They take it and they want to abuse it. And I just love that you put it that way, because I think people listening, they're like, I'll never find myself in that situation, you know, and
Right.
it's
Right.
sometimes we can be on this like high horse. Same with abuse. Like, you know, there are a lot of
Mm,
women and men who are like, I'll never, and it's like you get there. And I remember you saying to me before when we talked about this, it's like boiling a frog, because
yes.
it's that metaphor basically means like if you throw a frog in boiling hot water, it's going to jump out.
Hmm.
But if you put it in water, because it likes water, and then you just
Hmm.
like slowly raise the temperature, it doesn't know the
Yep.
difference until it's too late. Um,
Exactly.
and so I love how you put that. And I also love that you said that you had codependency characteristics or traits.
Hmm.
Because that's another thing I feel like people miss, where it's like being codependent doesn't mean that you're walking into a relationship and being like, I want to depend on this person. I want to, you know, completely
Hmm.
let them boss me around or whatever the case may be. But you have certain traits where you think you're doing something good. You know, like
Hmm.
sometimes people not having boundaries, they're like, well, I want to help people, or I want to be
Yes.
open, or I want to,
Hmm.
you know what I mean? All of those things. And so I just love that you said that. And I always like to educate my audience. So all these people, all the people out there who are like, I don't know what codependency is. What's literally, what is it? I have a definition. So basically, codependency is a theory that attempts to explain imbalanced relationships, essentially. One person enables another person's self-destructive behavior, either on purpose or unintentionally. And the behaviors can be like addiction, poor mental health, immaturity, irresponsibility, or underachievement. They're somehow enabling that. And also, it can be like trying to fix someone else's issues that they should be fixing themselves.
Hmm.
And then your identity kind of gets like intertwined with theirs. Like for some reason, you feel like you have to be the one to fix them,
Yes.
and you lose a sense of who you are in the midst of that. And to piggyback off the traits, just some of them, because I was doing research before I did this podcast, because you know I know I like to research, and I was looking up these personality traits, and some of them I was like, wait, I have some of these. Hold the phone. And so some of them that were unexpected to me were like offering advice even if it isn't asked for. That's like that fixing
Yeah.
mentality. Difficulty making decisions, people pleasing, like you
Yeah.
said,
Yeah.
um, fearing rejection, like all of these things that are like superhuman
Hmm.
things.
Right.
But like you said, when you find the right person who wants to prey on that, that's when
Yes.
it gets sticky.
Hmm.
So there's your education, guys. You're welcome. But Jen, like, you found your partner online.
Hmm. Yeah.
You know, a lot of people go online. I got married from being online. And so
Oh
you go
yeah,
on
my
that first.
boyfriend I'm dating now is from online.
Okay, yeah. So let's not shame online. For sure.
Not
For sure.
fine, just that is what
Hey,
where I met him.
so you go through the normal, you know, rigmarole of okay, now we
Yeah.
gotta go on a date. So I guess talk to me from there. Like, give me the backstory.
Yeah. How did I end up in a cult?
I freaking love you. You know,
Yeah.
y'all want to
So
know at what point did it happen?
at what point did I recognize that this was a cult? That is an interesting question because I actually could not call it a cult. I could not acknowledge that it was a cult until like 2 years after getting out. Like that's
Wow.
how brainwashed and enmeshed in it I was,
Yeah.
right? And because people think of a cult and they think of religious cults,
Like
they
Kimmy
think of,
Schmidt, you know.
yeah, these huge,
Yeah.
organizations of
Yeah.
fenced off communities. It's not that. It is a family system cult, and it's a very
Mm,
different type of cult, and it's one that nobody talks about or
yeah.
nobody even realizes is out there,
Yeah.
where essentially the reason it's called a cult and the reason they attribute it to a cult is because you have one person that is
Mm,
dictating everyone else's comings and goings. And
yeah.
I was told, that I was cutting the tomatoes wrong. I was washing too many towels. I had to get permission to go to the grocery store. While I was at the grocery store, I had to call while I was there to make sure that I was purchasing the right things at the right price. I mean, when you have one person that is ruling the roost, they control your finances, they control your coming and going, they control what you do in the home, they control, and not only are they controlling you, but they're controlling you with unspoken rules.
Yeah.
And not outwardly telling you can't or can. And that's where the manipulation and the brainwashing happens, because, and where the codependency plays in, because the way that they position it is that, oh, well, I'm helping the family, or I'm doing this and I'm doing these good things.
Like all
And
the
really
name
what
of
they're
love.
doing, really what they're doing is they're manipulating you, right? And so I didn't actually realize or know that this is what was happening, or this is what it was, until years out. Now, I always knew I didn't like it, right? I always knew it was off. I always knew something was wrong. And I felt that tension, but mixed in with that, right? The narcissist love bombs. So they just throw it on heavy. And there were lots of good times in the cult. Like, we did fun things, and there was fun aspects of us all living together and doing these things together, on top of being emotionally and psychologically abused every day. So that whole sense of like Stockholm syndrome, like, it's a real thing. Like, I loved this woman dearly, the bottom of my heart, while she abused me. But yeah, so we met online. The very first date we had was with the entire family. We never dated aside from the entire family. But here's where it's that boiling a frog thing, right?
Yeah.
When we had our first date, I was living in Seattle at the time. He was living in Portland, and I was home. I was from Portland, so I was home for the weekend, and they were going to a Blazer game, and they just happened to have an extra ticket. And so he invited me along, right, to go to the Blazer game with his entire family. Well, this wasn't a date planned specifically for me and for us to meet. It was, they were already going, and they're inviting me along because they had an extra ticket, and I just happened to be in town, right? Like, little did I know that, no, that's the way it would always be. Like, you don't get to do anything on your own. You don't get to go to dinner as a couple. You don't get to go to a movie as a couple. Like, dates don't exist. Even going out to dinner doesn't exist outside of the entire family. I mean, we would show up to restaurants and people would ask us, what's the occasion? And we're like, oh, just going out to eat. We'd start joking. We'd be like, oh, it's so-and-so's birthday, because you get so sick of the question.
Yeah.
But that's how insane it was. Like, all these people.
And you were just like, he's just a family person.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So our first few months of dating, I was in Seattle, he was in Portland. And so a lot of our initial dating was long distance. So, we were talking on the phone, we were texting, or even, like, there wasn't the family interaction. Yeah. Then when I moved back, then there was that family interaction. But by then I was already in love with this person, those rose-colored glasses, and so I just started making excuse after excuse of being a part of this family. And when we had conversations, it was always, oh, well, we're not going to live with them when we get married, right? We're going to have our own place. Well, through a huge series of unfortunate events, we ended up living there. And it was exactly how I thought it was going to be. Awful. It was awful. Even before I moved in, I didn't know the extent to which I would be controlled until I was living in the house. And even in that sense, too, some people were controlled more than others. Like her 3 sons, they'd get berated every once in a while, but really it was all of us wives that lived there that really took the heat of it. Narcissists, they have their scapegoat is the terminology, but one person really gets the brunt of it, and unfortunately that was me. And I don't know if it was because I was the last one in. I don't know if it was because I did push the envelope right in the beginning with my personality and wanting to stand up for myself. I would question things, or I would speak my mind, and she didn't like that.
Did you feel like you were just trying to like keep the peace, like in your marriage?
100%. 100%. Yeah. I mean, it came to the point where it was just like, I know if I speak up,
Mm.
it's not going to be good for me. You just get to a point where you stop talking, you stop. And I remember towards the end, I walked into the kitchen one day and she was like, "You look so miserable and pissed off all the time." And I just remember thinking in my head, yeah, I am, because of
Yeah.
you. Like,
Right.
because of how you treat me and how you treat all of us in this house. It is misery. I talk to people and they're like, "Why don't you just leave?" The fear that I had
Yeah.
of walking out or packing my bags and leaving, like, it was terrifying. Even when we first moved out, we had a place rented for an entire month before we even got up the nerve to say we were leaving. Like, that's how like nerve-wracking and terrifying it was
I'm
to stand
sure.
up to her. The codependency, right, that you read
Yeah.
about, that loss of self. When I got out, I had to make decisions
Yeah.
and I didn't know how.
Yeah. That's
It's
what
like
I
I
was.
forgot how to make
Yeah.
decisions for
Yeah,
myself.
for sure. For people who are really like, okay, guys, I'm lost on the idea of what a cult is. I'm lost on
Yeah.
the idea of what codependency is. Um, for those people, like, talk to me about like what she was actually controlling that made you feel helpless.
Everything. She
Yeah.
controlled everything. I mean, she even controlled what time I went to bed at night. And this is the thing, is she did it in a roundabout way.
Yeah.
She didn't say, "Jen, you can't go to bed at 9 p.m. You have to go to bed at 11." Like, that's just
Right.
crazy, right? And she knows it's crazy. So I had my son when I was living there, right? I got pregnant and I had my son. And so I was exhausted. I was tired.
Right.
I wasn't sleeping at night. And I would go up to put him to bed and I'd fall asleep. Well, I'd fall asleep and then I'd wake up and be like, "Oh, crap, I fell asleep," right? So then I'd hurry up and go downstairs, whatever. And so the way that she did it was through comments, right? Like, "Oh, well, it must be nice that you're up there, resting while the rest of us are down here cleaning up dinner. That
Mm.
must be nice. Did you have a good nap?" Or if you woke up past a certain time in the morning, it was, "Oh, must be nice to sleep in so late. Wow. I hope that other people get the opportunity to do that sometime instead of, getting the kids ready for soccer practice."
Yeah.
Or, they didn't even play soccer, but you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
and so it was like guilt trips. Let me say things that make you feel like you're the scum of the earth. And then I'm going to reform your behavior so that next time you don't do that.
Even if
And
it's just because you don't want to hear mouth. You're
yeah,
like, I don't want to hear mouth, so I'm just gonna do this. And then it's like after a while you're like, oh wait,
yeah,
I'm being controlled.
exactly. That's exactly it. And it was all unspoken rules. Like even I owned my own vehicle. And at one point her son didn't have a vehicle. So she was like, "Well, you can just carpool and she can drop you off at the bus when it gets close to your work. You can take the bus the rest of the way. And then that way he has a vehicle because there's no way for him to take a bus or anything to work." And so she would just determine, like, that this is what was happening. And it's not like I couldn't say, "Screw you, it's my car.
Yeah.
I'm going to drive my own car to work." Otherwise it was, "Wow, you are so selfish. You're telling me that you're not willing to carpool so that Joe can go to work and make money for his family because you just want to drive your own car. How selfish of you."
Yeah.
It's not control the way you think of control. It's
Mm-hmm.
just a series of manipulations and comments, small
Yeah.
little comments that just feed in and they just feed in and then they start to
Yeah.
develop into you
Yeah.
acting and performing a certain way because you
Right.
know how what she's going to think, how she's going to respond. And at the end of the day, we were all trying to win our brownie points with her. You find yourself bending over backwards and trying to please and vacuum the house before someone can make a comment about how the house needs to be vacuumed, right? Oh,
Right.
well, I did it. But then you never receive that yeah,
Affirmation or any of those
no.
things. It's just like, and to just have to like imagine being in that situation. And like you said, you were a very strong, independent, vocal human,
Mm-hmm.
and to be put in that environment and how we adapt. And so we're
Right.
like, what can make this be the most comfortable situation ever? Okay, I have
Right.
to do this, I'll do it. Okay, I'll do that, I'll
Okay.
do it. And then after a while, it's like you lose
Mm-hmm.
yourself.
Right. Yeah, you're coping. Your coping mechanisms start to kick in because you're in fight or flight mode.
Yeah.
Like you're being abused, and so you're like, okay, what do I need to do to survive this? You start finding the ways that you can cope with it, and those come in the form of, well, I'm just going to shut my mouth because then maybe I won't get yelled at, or I'm going to carpool because I don't want to get yelled at. Everything was, what can I do to keep the peace
Keep the peace.
and
Yeah.
to have some sort of resemblance of stability in this chaos of a household.
Yeah. And you said she somewhat controlled your finances as well, right?
Yeah, oh yeah. I mean, she knew how much I made. She didn't have access to my bank account, but she knew how much I made, and she made sure that how much I made was taken out and spent on the family each and every month. An example, she would have me go to Costco, and she would make me a Costco list that was astronomical. I don't know. Do you have Costco? Is
Yeah, yeah,
Costco
yeah.
everywhere? Okay.
Yeah.
Everybody jokes, you can't get out of Costco without spending $100, right? I
Right.
would spend $800 at
Jen.
Costco. And she would make me these lists of things like mayo. And we had a pantry, an outdoor pantry that had about 10 containers of mayo. But on my list would be mayo. Because why? It's never going to go bad. Like it can sit there and we can use it. And so if Jen leaves or something, well, at least we have this mayo. She would make it so that I would have to buy things that was totally unnecessary. We did not
Right.
need another jar of
Jar of
mayo,
mayo.
And so, but because she was trying to, whittle out my finances, that was on the list. And Costco was my responsibility. So every month I went to Costco and I had to buy all this crap. I'm surprised I still go there, honestly.
You're like, it's too traumatizing.
It says something about Costco, right? That I can still love it even after all the
Samples. It's
trauma.
the samples. When you moved in, it was like you were down on your luck a little bit. So she was almost like taking advantage of the fact that you
Right.
needed to be there.
Yes, 100%.
It's like, well, this is your contribution to the house because
Exactly.
yeah.
And so my ex, he was like, well, I don't want to live there. And he's like, well, we kind of have to live there. And she's willing to let us live there, but you need to sit down with her and ask permission. And I was like, what? What? Like, so even that process was like, she was, oh, how sweet and kind and dear am I to take you in.
To take you in. Oh, gosh.
Do you know? Like, everything was twisted and manipulated and just like upside down, completely upside down. Other ways that she would control finances is they would decide to make a purchase, like a new dining room set. So they'd buy a new dining room set and it'd be divided amongst the 4 families, her excluded, right? She wasn't included in any of these type of purchases. So the 4 families would have to divide it evenly. Well, we didn't have even incomes.
Right.
Like some people in the home were making a lot more than we were, but it was all even. It was all quote unquote fair, right? So that was another way. I had to pay rent to live there.
So you had to go to Costco and pay rent?
Yeah. And I had to pay childcare. So once I had my son, I had to pay her to watch my son while I was at work, which I had to go back to work a week after having my son. I wasn't allowed to stay home any longer than that because I needed to get back to making money. So I only had 1 week maternity leave, and then I was back to work. And I wasn't allowed to bathe my son either. Oh no. I didn't know what I was doing. So, she had to bathe all the kids. Like, I could go on and on. I will be writing a memoir.
I'm so sorry. I feel so, because I'm like, I don't want you to be offended by my facial expressions, but
I know. Yeah.
She like robbed you of moments with your child.
Exactly. And my parents too. Like, my parents didn't even get to know their own grandchildren, their own grandson, because, I wasn't allowed to go over there. That was never said, though. This is what was said. What was said was, they're more than welcome to come over here anytime they want. That was what was said, right? So I could invite my parents over. They could come hang out with the family, whatever. But, going over there, that was never mentioned. That was like, But then if you did invite them over, she made your life miserable. You had to clean the house. You had to do this. You had to do that. You had to go do that. She made you jump through all of these hoops to have your own dang parents over, as if they were like some guest from, the Queen of England coming to the house. Like, scrub the floors with a toothbrush, Cinderella. The point was, let me make your life miserable, and then I'll tell you they can come over whenever they want.
Yeah.
You think I want to invite them over when you're going to treat me like this the whole week leading up to it? No, thank you. I'd rather just not invite them.
And you're kind of answering it anyway, but I was going to ask you, like, how did living in this cult affect the other relationships in your life? Because I know you did have family and even your son. Like, how did that all...
You weren't allowed to have other relationships in your life. She wanted you isolated within the family, because here's the thing, is if you have other relationships, they're going to tell you...
They're going to talk some sense in,
something right here, know? And she knows that. But when you're in it and she's grooming and manipulating, and she's got you all wrapped up in her love bombing and isolated within that, you're in a fog. You're not thinking clearly. And even though along the way I knew I don't like this, something isn't right, like, a part of me still thought it was okay, didn't understand really the abuse that was happening. I was also not allowed to be on social media. She didn't want us on social media because then we would be connecting with people in the outside world that would tell us how crazy this is, right?
And you could have access to other resources and you would need her. Yeah.
And so I lost all my friends. I saw my parents a couple times a year, and I was just extremely, extremely isolated. The only people that I really talked to were people at my work. And luckily I worked with an amazing group of people who, to this day, I'm still great friends with one of my coworkers who basically was my support system for me to be able to talk about this stuff. And she just supported me. Like, she knew it was not good and not okay, but she also knew that she couldn't tell me that, because then I would freak out.
You didn't want to like lose your ear. Yeah.
Right. So she literally just listened to me. And the thing that she always told me was, I am here to support you no matter what you do and no matter what decisions you make. And we're still friends to this day.
That's awesome.
And so I was lucky to have someone during that time when I did not have anyone. And within the home, it was a really interesting dynamic too, because it's like you knew that the other women felt it.
Yeah.
But you couldn't talk about it because it was like, do they think this is weird?
Right. And so you don't want to bring it up and then it get back to her, and then your life's even...
Because it did. It would get back to her because she would pit us against each other. And she would have a conversation with one daughter-in-law, and she would, tell them, oh, well, Jen seems really like blah, 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 and she'd make up some story about me. And then then it would like affect our relationship. So she kept
Hmm.
all of us women kind of like pitted
Yeah.
against each other so that we couldn't rally forces. You know what I mean? And like
Yeah.
and say, so
This
none of
is
us
some
really
crap.
talked
Yeah.
about it. We all kind of like treaded lightly. The amount of tactics that were used, like we went a whole season with no hot water. We had freezing cold water, and I don't remember what the excuse was for not getting it fixed, but we essentially took freezing cold showers for months. And I look back on that and I'm like, and I know some people like cold showers, okay?
Yeah.
Me
Not
personally,
I.
no thank
No.
you.
No.
But it's just one of those tactics of like beating you down to where you're so exhausted and you're so worn out and you are so miserable physically that you can't think clearly,
Yeah,
you
you don't have
know?
the energy.
I think at one point the sewer backed up, and so we couldn't even dump our shower water. We had to like we had to put like a Tupperware, not a Tupperware, like a Rubbermaid bin in the shower with us, turn the water on, bathe really quick, rinse off, and then we had to lug the Rubbermaid outside and dump our shower water outside. Just how hard can we make your life? Let's do that so that then we can
Right.
manipulate and control you. It was crazy the amount of things, and we just like did it. I don't know,
Yeah.
like
You're like,
why?
what in the
Why?
world?
Like who does that? Who doesn't just like walk, pack their bags, and walk out, right?
Yeah, but you make such a
And
good point. You make such a good point on why not, because everybody can judge when they're not in it.
mhm.
But if you're like, this is all I can do right now, I just gotta, like you said, make my peace with it and figure out a way to get out of whatever rut I'm in, and somebody's taking advantage of you and they're psychologically manipulating, like anyone would get stuck in that.
Well, in their family, right?
Yeah.
We have this family,
Yeah.
and yeah, they're not my blood, but they're other people in the home. It's their blood. And you get wrapped up in this idea of like you love your family, and so you endure so much more crap from your family. At the end of the day, man, abuse is abuse, no
Yeah.
matter who you're receiving it from. But when there's emotion there, and that's where talk about that Stockholm and even the codependency, right? Like you want there to be peace and you want there to be harmony because they're your family and you love them, you know? And so you're just willing to do so much more and sacrifice so much more when it's this family unit. And like my son was born at the same time as his two cousins. They were born months from
Mm.
each other. They were like triplets, and they did. And so when I thought about leaving, I knew that I was ripping apart a family unit. And that broke my heart. And for years after I left, I had to mourn. And despite all the abuse and the trauma and the craziness of it all, I loved those people. I still love those people. The ones that are there that are still enduring and suffering the pain of it all, my heart breaks for them
Yeah.
every day. And the kids that are still there growing up in it, thinking this is normal,
Yeah.
it it is. It's so hard when it's family.
So speaking of family, the couple of times of the year that you were able to talk to your
Mhm.
parents, what did they have to say about it? Because they love you. They're
Oh, we
not in
didn't
this
talk
situation,
about it. Yeah.
like
No, we didn't
ever.
talk about it. They
Mm,
came and they were with the family and they smiled and they tried to enjoy my company. And then they left and talked about it, right? But I
okay.
think I think that they just knew that I was in it
Yeah.
and that there was nothing that they could say or do
Yeah.
that was going to make me see the light. Plus, they didn't know the extent of it. They did not know the extent of it
Yeah.
until after I got out. And then I tell them these stories, and they were my dad was livid. He's
I'm
like, had I
sure.
known, really, what was
He would have
going
packed your
on.
bags himself, I'm sure.
Yeah, exactly. I would have dragged you out of that house. They thought I was happy. You know, I
And they
looked
just wanted you
happy.
to be happy.
Right.
Mm.
Yeah.
How'd you get out?
Yeah. So like halfway
Mm.
through my marriage, my ex started cheating on me and having an affair. And our marriage was just deteriorating. And that was the only reason I was there. And so as that started to unravel, I just started asking myself, like, why am I here? And he was never there because he was working, quote unquote, working, right? While he was living a second life away from the house. I don't blame him. I don't blame him for not wanting to be there, right?
Right.
And so I just got to the point where I was like, I've got to get out of here. What am I doing? And so I basically told him, I was like, I'm leaving. Like, I have to leave. I've got to get out of here. And he wanted out too. He didn't have the courage. He didn't have the courage to stand up to her and say, this is what we're doing and we're leaving. I just basically started saving $20 aside a month, right? Because she knew what
Yeah.
was coming in and out of my account. And so I started saving 20 bucks, 20 bucks, 20 bucks. On my lunch breaks, I would go look at places to rent because I couldn't
The
just
house.
leave the house whenever
Yeah.
I wanted. So I started looking for places to rent. I found a place, got up enough money to rent it, asked to be, late to work so I could do this walkthrough and get the keys and whatever. And like I said, we had it for an entire month before we got to the courage to like actually say that we were leaving. Just like a slow, secretive process. I had like addresses written down on like piece of paper or something. And at one point, one of them fell out of my pocket and ended up on the kitchen counter on display. And I was just like, oh my gosh, they found me out. She's going to make my life miserable. Like I grabbed it real quick and like ran. And so she knew. So when we told her we were leaving, we would expect that she'd be mad, that she would tell us we needed to stay, that she'd be disappointed. But instead, she went the love bombing route. And she was like, oh, how great it is that you guys want to spread your wings and and just it was so amazing. And here, take the dishes. You're gonna need dishes for your new place, and take this couch. And then the script would flip, like all of a sudden abruptly, right? Where she would be upset, that why didn't we tell her sooner? She wouldn't have been upset, but we should have let them know sooner, oh, it was
But I
just
can't
crazy.
imagine. I can't imagine.
Afterwards, for a full year, she was still controlling me from afar. Like I had to go like run errands for her or pick something up on the way home, or we still had to go to the church that they went to. So I literally would get up, go to the 8 a.m. service at the church I actually wanted to go to, and then I'd leave from that service to go to their service because I had to go to their service. This is how warped and wrapped up she had me in my mind.
Yeah.
And like my counselor at one point, she's like, you don't have to go to their Thanksgiving. And I was like, what do you mean? Of course I have to go to their Thanksgiving. And she's like, no, you actually don't. And I drove home from that counseling appointment just sobbing and laughing at the same time because I was so liberated that somebody told me I didn't have to do what she wanted. And it was
Right.
like mind blowing to me. I couldn't even fathom that I didn't have to do something that she expected of me.
You finally get out, and then now she's still manipulating your mind that you have to be there and do this and do
Mm-hmm.
that. But then you get this like breakthrough. I don't have to do it.
Yeah.
What was the retaliation?
Yeah. So I didn't go to Thanksgiving.
I'm proud of
Which,
you for that.
which, by the way, my dad was sick at the time and his health was really bad. And so he like was in bed all day Thanksgiving. So literally me and my mom and son spent Thanksgiving together. And had I gone to their Thanksgiving, my mom would have spent Thanksgiving alone. And
Mm.
I told her this, right? So she calls me at work. Why didn't you come to Thanksgiving? Right? And she's just questioning why I didn't come to Thanksgiving. You said you were going to come. And I said, well, I decided that I was going to stay home with my parents. My dad was sick and I didn't want my mom to be alone for Thanksgiving. Yeah. And her response was, she wasn't alone. Your dad was there. Like, that's the kind of thought process. Like, what do you mean? Like, he's sick. Like, that is the narcissist, right? The narcissist is all about them, all about their family. If somebody would have been alone for Thanksgiving at her family or somebody that she thought,
oh no, yeah.
Right? I mean, no way. That is unacceptable. But for it to be my family, then all of a sudden I'm supposed to leave my mom home alone for Thanksgiving and spend it with you guys? Like, how are you more important than my mom being home alone for Thanksgiving?
Right. And my dad being sick. Come on.
Yeah. It's just everything is about them. Everything is, you know, and so she ringed me out on the phone and, you know, my heart's pounding and I'm like freaking out. And I get off and I'm at work. Boundaries, right? Like, who answers the phone of somebody who abused them for 6 years while they're at work? Like, just don't answer the phone.
I love that you can like laugh about it now.
Oh gosh, because it's insane, you know. And so I hang up the phone, and then I'm just like a mess, right? So I go back to work, and that's the thing with codependency too, right? Is it's like your emotions and what you feel get so wrapped up in other people's emotions and feelings. And so what I found is that, you know, if someone else is in a bad mood, I let that affect me. Like, I can't detach myself from it.
Yeah.
You know, I've gotten a lot better working through it, but it's like, if she was upset with me, I was crawling in a hole.
Yeah.
Like, you know,
like, oh my gosh, I gotta fix this. I gotta make her.
Yes, so upset. I did something wrong. Like, I'm a horrible person. I should have done this. What do I need to do to fix it? I need to fix this. I need to make the peace. Like, and then I had somebody else tell me, they actually grabbed my phone from me as I'm, you know, telling them this conversation, and they're like, block her number. And I was like, what? I can't do that. Like, the unfathomable, right? Like,
because she'll do this, and then that'll
and the fear associated with all of it, you know, like, what's she gonna do to me? And so through counseling and through these people in my life, they're like, you have to go no contact. Like, you have no reason to talk to her. Like, there's nothing good that's gonna come out of any conversation with her that is not abusive. And so I decided to go no contact. And then that's when I really just started to like see the light, you know, because when you have someone talking into your ear all the time, it's really hard to differentiate, you know, because they're manipulating you and they're in your head. And so until you can get them out of your head and get a break from them, that's when you start to find that clarity and you start to see what's really going on.
That makes so much sense. Like, you definitely need the distance to be able to differentiate between like what actually has to happen and like what doesn't, or what I have control over and what I don't.
Right. Yeah. And to be able to let it go and just say, you know what? I actually wrote her a letter forgiving her. It was so liberating for me because it was like, I'm letting this go.
Yeah.
And I'm letting you go.
And
I'm forgiving this. And I'm just not going to think about it anymore. And I did the letter writing exercise as a part of like, you know, counseling therapy session. And never with the intent to send it. Right. And then one day I just decided I'm going to put this thing in the mail. And I did. I just got a stamp and I put it in the mail and I sent it to her. And the funny thing is one of my other sister-in-laws that lived there, she got out too. She got out now about 2 years ago. So grateful. And so happy for her. She's had a harder journey than me. Her kids are still there. But she was there when she got the letter, right? She was still living there. And she told me, she just talked to the whole family about this letter and how funny the letter was and how, um, just ridiculous this letter
Mm.
was or whatever. But, what she didn't know is like behind closed doors, the girls are like, Jen's kind of right.
Yeah. And
Like,
now you've brought like what she didn't know she was doing is you brought like them together as opposed to what she was
yeah,
trying to do before, which is like tear them apart. Because
right.
now they
Yeah.
have a common enemy, really.
Yeah. And unfortunately, two of them are still there. And
Mm.
it just breaks my heart. But, and I sent one of them, there's this YouTube video about narcissistic family cult. Like, if you Google it, like, it's a thing, it's a real thing. And I sent it to one of them, the one that I thought would actually get out, who's still there. The one that I never thought would leave is the one who
Yeah.
got out. But I sent it to her, and she showed it to to one of the others, and she's like, "Look at this." She's like, I think we're living in a cult. Like, she could watch it and acknowledge and
Oh,
see
that's awesome.
that, yes, it is. And it was, but unfortunately, like, she's just still so buried in it
Yeah.
that she's still there. Like, she saw that video,
That's
she
hard.
knows but she can't get out.
Get out.
Like, she can't make, take the steps to get out. It's too much. It's too much.
I'm sure it sounds a lot like it was a lot for you too. And once you got out, like, where's your husband in all this? Did he stay?
Oh my
Did
goodness,
he leave with
that
you?
is a story for another podcast.
Oh gosh.
So, really quick, in a
Okay.
nutshell, my ex ended up getting charges filed against him for pedophilia and landed in
Oh.
prison for 5 years. And he actually just got out not that long ago. Haven't had any contact with him, but that's where that story went. And I ended up, you know, divorcing him.
Yeah.
But that's a whole long story too, with lots of layers to it. And I really actually was trying to still make it work, like even after him being in prison. Like,
Mm.
I'm a firm believer that people can grow and change and develop,
Yeah.
and that people deserve forgiveness and people deserve
Yeah.
second chances. And so I really was
Oof.
pressing into that.
Yeah.
Um, but it came down to me realizing that as much as I wanted to fix him, right? That codependency piece.
Mm.
Oh, I'm going to save him. I'm going to send him all this curriculum and he's going to change. And, my codependency piece, I had to look at it and I had to say, okay, Jen, you want him to change, but everything that he's telling you and expressing is he's telling you he's in denial that he even has a problem,
Mm.
let alone thinks he needs to change. And once I realized that and was able to know that I couldn't do anything for him, he needed to do it for himself, and he
Yeah.
was not making those choices to do that for himself, is when I realized I can't be with this person.
Yeah.
And so
That's huge.
yeah, yeah. Can't fix people. We can support people, we can help people, and I enabled him for a lot of years. I enabled by staying there, by living there, by doing all the things she wanted me to do. Her own mother enabled her. Her own mother,
Mm.
just made the
So it's
excuse,
like
oh, it's just the
cycles.
way she is.
Yeah.
We all have to cater and morph, and she's family, and it's not okay. We have
No.
to have boundaries. We have to
Yeah.
know what we're okay with and what we're not okay with, and follow through with it. And that doesn't mean we're bad people. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean that we're assholes. No, it means
Jen.
that we respect ourselves enough to know that certain things are not okay with us, and that
Yeah.
we walk away from those things, even if it's family.
Yeah.
And even if it's a
That's so
romantic
good.
relationship, your partner, whatever it is, like, everybody has to have their boundaries.
And I think that's a lesson I'm learning about. I can't compromise myself for someone else's
Mm-hmm.
growth. or
Yeah.
benefit. And I literally had this conversation this week of coming to the realization that I'm like, when I've been in really low places and when I felt like I needed people, like I never wanted to leave anybody to like fend for
Mhm.
themselves or feel alone. And so I'm going to stay with you and I'm going to make sure you understand and I'm going to make sure you get it and I'm going to hold your hand. And to
Mhm.
your point, like there are so many people, and I'm sure Podcast Land is resonating with some of you, if not a lot of you, like just that feeling of wanting to stay, even though everything that that other person is telling you is, I don't want to
Mhm.
change. I'm not going to change. I don't care how many times you say it. Like, this is who I am. This is who I'm choosing to be. And, you know, for so many of us, we stay. And for so many of us, we're like, you don't mean that.
Mhm. Yeah.
And, and, and guys, I do have a podcast about boundaries. If you're unfamiliar, please go listen to it. Because boundaries are so important. Boundaries help us with our self control and our self protection. And if you don't have them, you're lacking self control and you're lacking protection. And
Yes.
I just think that was so beautiful what you just said. And it was, I hope people were listening. Because I was like, that was so great. And I just know maybe not everyone's in a cult, but
Right. I mean, I hope
it just,
not.
yeah, let's pray. But it doesn't have to be that extreme for you to be in
Right.
a codependent situation that's not serving you. So earlier at the beginning of the podcast, you said you were dating.
I
That makes me
am.
excited.
Yeah. Hmm.
You said you did therapy, but how are you dealing with like the remnants of
Oh
it in
gosh.
this
I
new, hopefully
know.
healthy situation, you know?
Hmm. Yeah. The remnants are a real thing.
Yeah.
And I think I've realized and come to terms with the fact that it's always going to be a part of me
Yeah.
and it's always going to follow me.
Yeah.
Um, for the rest of my life, I will be triggered by things.
Mm, I love
But
that
what I'm
answer.
learning is I can work through those triggers. And
Ooh, that takes so much maturity to say.
and I can acknowledge them. I can stop and I can see them for what they are.
Mm,
And then I can say, this, I can acknowledge this is why I'm feeling this way,
yeah.
because this is what I went through and this is what
Yeah.
I endured. And I am, I want to think about this differently. That was the past, and that's not what's happening in this situation. Even though this situation is making me feel the same way, it doesn't mean that the same thing is happening. It's just triggering me to feel that way. And so it is a process, and I do not always get it right.
Yeah. Thank you for
But
normalizing
luckily,
us screwing
right?
things up.
Luckily, I have a lot of tools in my tool belt. Yeah, it's definitely a process, and it's interesting too because when I first started dating, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm healthy. Like I've been to all this
Great.
counseling, I've done these groups, like I've done all the things. And then I got into a relationship and all the things come out.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like when you're in an intimate relationship with someone, it's like
Yep.
it just presses on
Yep.
all those
Yep.
things that you thought were healed.
It'll show you what's not. It'll
Exactly.
show you.
And it's like, okay, there's some more work there.
Yeah.
There's some
Yeah.
more things to look at. But luckily I have a huge support system. I've got people that know me, that they know my story, they know all the ins and outs, and I have them as a resource, and I have them supporting me, backing me, helping me through this.
Yeah.
I think I will be in counseling for the rest of my life. Like,
Same
that's
here.
a thing. And,
Raise his hand.
it's like every time I think I'm like, maybe we should take a break, I'm like,
Yeah.
something happens and I'm like, yep, no,
Yeah.
still need to work through this. And it's just, it keeps you on the right track. I think so
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes we start getting down this track and we don't realize that we're on that track, but having somebody be touching base with you and checking in with you on a regular basis, it just
Yeah.
keeps you moving in a healthy direction.
Yeah.
And I want that for my life,
Yeah.
so sign me up. I'm in counseling forever.
How does it feel to know that you're in a healthier relationship?
Oh, I feel extremely grateful. to be in a healthy relationship. I feel like there's a lot of unhealthy relationships. I feel like there's more unhealthy relationships than healthy. And so I hold extreme gratitude being in the place that I'm in. And let me tell you, I dated a lot of guys. I got right back on that online game, and I tell you what, like, it was a revolving door until I found the guy that I'm with. And it's like, I just realized, you know, like, there's so much more to being in a relationship, and you can love someone. You can love someone, and it doesn't mean that they're the right person for you, and that it's healthy, and it's not just love that should be considered, right? So that's really the space that I'm in, and I'm very grateful for that space. And you know, we're still figuring it out. We're 10 months in. You know, we're not married. We're not.
I know.
Even
Congratulations
close to
anyway.
being married. And so it's a journey, and we're still in that process of figuring it out. But it's liberating to know that, you know, I'm processing through this dating relationship in a very different space than I was in the people pleasing, let me change myself for you space that I was the first time around.
I love that. I'm so proud of you too, because I'm like, first of all, you're literally on like a public platform talking about all of the things that you've gone through and welcoming the vulnerability and the help and the healing, but also possibly the judgment, and you're just like taking it all, and you're just like, whatever, this is my story. And so many people have a hard time doing that, like, legit.
Well, I was quiet for a lot of years.
Yeah,
I'm not about being quiet anymore.
That's that redhead, man. Thank you for your bravery, and thank you for your vulnerability here. I'm hoping, I don't even have to hope because I know that your story is going to help a lot of people. So that's amazing. And I want to read that book because you're going to write it.
I'll let you know.
Thanks for being here today.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Yeah. I thought that was awesome. And just to reiterate, guys, like, if you've heard this story or heard this topic about codependency, and you're like, yeah, not sure if that's happened to me or not. Like, therapy's available. There's resources in your city. I'm positive of it. Don't hesitate to reach out to a professional. You're not crazy. You just heard a story. And if you listen to my podcast long term, you've heard so many other stories of people who found themselves in a situation that they needed help out of. So you're not unique in that way, but at the same time, like, there's grace for you there. So don't pass up on it. And I know I always ask everyone how they feel after they heard the conversation, but I'm starting to be like, is that smart? Because I don't know how I feel. But I definitely think that you've given me some things to think about and just reflect on. And I don't necessarily think that I'm currently in any codependent relationships, but I'm like, I have some of those traits. Like, how do I work on those traits? You know what I mean? And because I don't think that they're bad, but I also don't think that I want to continue to be vulnerable to something I don't even know is there or don't recognize is there. So thank you for that.
Yes.
Because I'll definitely be doing some reflective work there. But as we all know, relationships are tricky, and I hope you had something to take away from this conversation that we had today. We laughed a lot, and I'm glad you're in a place where you could laugh about it. And I hope you cried if you needed to, whatever you needed to. Make no mistake, I would love to hear what you loved most about this podcast episode. And if there's a topic that you want me to talk about, don't hesitate to hit me up on Instagram, where I'm most active at Unleash the Niche. That's Unleash, THA, niche with 2 E's. And you can also find me on any other platform pretty much at Unleash the Niche. So there you go. And Jen, where can we find you? Because you're doing your interior design game, which she's amazing, guys.
Yeah.
So where can we find you?
My Instagram is just Studio Red, RED, interior design. And that's where I'm most active, is on that my business Instagram. So yeah. Come check
Ooh,
it out.
go check it out. Maybe you can hire her sometime because she's
That's
amazing.
right. We do e-design.
There, there you go. There you go. And if you correct me up, and if you think more people should listen to this show, you can help me get the podcast noticed by sending an episode to a friend, writing a review on Apple Podcasts, and by continuing to share on social media. And if you want to go deeper into the topics, laugh harder, join me over on Patreon at patreon.com/unleash the niche. You get personal vlogs, the video version of the podcast, and much more. So you don't want to miss out on that. And I think that's it. That was amazing.
Yay!
Loved hanging out with you today. Again, thank you so much for joining us today. Maybe we can impact the world or something. I'll leave you with that.
Let's
Bye.
do it.
Let's do it. Bye.